comprehensive plan and zoning change at 1160 and 1170 Deer Island Road. Jacob?
Thank you. So this is a legislative land use hearing. The subject of this hearing is as described by the mayor. The applicant is Leslie. Not Leslie Koff, Leslie Everett. Because legislative proceedings require the observance of certain procedural formalities, the council must take a few moments to cover some preliminary matters and required statements. Does any member of the council wish to declare conflict of interest or bias in this matter? I don't see any. Does anyone from the audience want to object to the ability of a commissioner to make a fair decision? The rules of the conduct of the hearing are on the table in the back of the room. Generally, the order of the proceedings will be as follows: required statements, as I'm doing now, staff report, which I'll follow up with, and then any presentation by the applicant, and then those in favor, those opposed, those neutral, rebuttal by the applicant, close of the hearing, close of the record, and deliberations and decision. The following statements are to be made at the commencement of this hearing. Standards for this are based on 17.2120 of the Development Code. All testimony and arguments must be directed towards the standards listed or other criteria which the person believes apply to the decision. So let's get into the meat of things. This is a property on Deer Island Road across from the transit center. In this aerial photo from 2009, the Friesen site discontinued as a mill, and as you can see, it was demolished and leveled. The property is highlighted in yellow. It's both a property owned by the applicant, and then there's a little chunk of city-owned property to the right or to the east of that, which is an entrance or a street access that the city's used in the past to access the city shop's property. If you recall, several months ago, we asked the council if it was okay if that was included in this application, just because of how the zoning and comp plan map looked, which we'll look up very soon. So that's where we're at in the world. So it's 0.58 acres total, 0.4 acres is owned by the applicant. It's currently zoned light industrial, and Crystal, if you could go to the next map, the zoning map. So gray on there is light industrial, and the proposal is to go to apartment residential, which is the brown in that. And then to do that, we also have to amend our comprehensive plan accordingly. And so the reason for it is we have a couple of non-conforming uses on this property. There's a duplex and single-family dwelling. They were built in the 30s and 40s, so they've been there a long time. The single-family dwelling, the status of that is pretty much gone. It hasn't been lived in for enough time based on our non-conforming use rules. And what that means is if a use is existing but is not allowed by the current zoning, and it's destroyed, not lived in, discontinued, what have you, then the non-conforming right to continue that goes away. And they had some problems with the house, which they'll talk about, and they kind of ran into that problem. The other situation is you have two, what we call principal uses on the same property, but that's a separate matter. But that means they'll need to partition it after they do this zone change. But they want to add dwelling units or one unit on the property, and so that's the reason for the change. The zoning comes from the 1970s, and so several decades after the use was established, the zoning came into play. And I imagine it was because of the surrounding existing industrial use at the time, which is pretty typical for St. Helens zoning, as I've observed. So things to consider: housing. Based on our most recently adopted land use inventory, we need more apartment residential land, and it just so happens that the abutting zoning district is apartment residential, so fantastic. That's one box we can check in favor of the applicant. If it was a different zone, maybe it would be a different story, but it's not, so we don't have to go there. And one thing that we like to see is to make sure that the zoning patterns are consistent. And so this is why we asked the council for that little, I don't know, I call it a property peninsula to be included. That way the apartment residential zone is consistent across the board. And so it's a decision as you as a reviewing their applicant as well as your own property as the council. Employment lands. So when they first came in and mentioned their issue, they were very nice about it. And I always had to, okay, well, they kind of got themselves in a jam. But I always have to think about, we have to defend our employment lands, our industrial and commercial lands. And so, initially, in my mind, I was a little reserved on it. But we've kind of looked at it pretty thoroughly, and we found that losing this small portion of industrial isn't going to shoot ourselves in the foot with regards to our employment lands. And so that's good. So that's another box we can check. The Planning Commission reviewed it, and they unanimously recommended in favor of it. And they actually had some additional comments that supported it. One thing they talked about is change over time. As I mentioned, the zoning in the 70s, freezing the lumber mill that was there. Of course, now it's the transit center. And the transit center is likely to be there for a long time. Residential use is more compatible with the transit center. So if it's still a mill, maybe a little more difficult to look at, but because of that change, it's a lot easier to get on board changing to residential. Another thing that the commission commented on is in the apartment residential zone, there's the possibility of having a neighborhood market, and I don't believe that that's the applicant's intent at all. But the Planning Commission's good about separating themselves from use and zone and looking at the possibility of zoning. And so they thought, well, because of the transit center being there, in the long term, there's the opportunity for a market, so that's another feather in the applicant's cap in support of it. No controversy on this one, and at this point, it's a pretty easy one to get behind. Questions? So then it would be the applicant's presentation. So if the applicant would like to discuss your proposal, or this would be the opportunity.
You hit that button on the lower part there, and there you go.
Okay. Hello. Yeah, I'm Leslie Everett, and this is my brother-in-law Peter Frank, and it's my sister Peter's wife. So we own the property, jointly. I just need to recap, I guess, on what we said before. Give you a little bit of background. Is that what you'd like us to do?
Yeah, we did present it to you once before.
Yeah.
My wife.
Okay.
So I think you know the basics of
Sure.
what we're trying to do. Just a
We've
reminder.
owned the property since for the last 3 years, and when we took it on, both properties had tenants in, they're both rental properties, and then a year ago, this month we lost 1160 Deer Island Road due to a fire. Unfortunately, it was too bad to recoup. So the little house, as we call it, has more or less disappeared. It's still there as a shell, but
It's just not worth
it's
repairing.
we went into all the options for it, and we came back to the decision that it just wasn't worth trying to save it as such. So we started thinking what else we could do with the property, and what we would like to do is to put something very similar to what's already there. We already have 2 tenants living in 2 separate. It's a double duplex, so one on the front and on the back. But they are NOAA tenants, so low cost, affordable housing, and that's the way that we'd like to go with similar building on where the little house was, to make it to provide more affordable, affordable, living accommodation for two more families. We don't actually have finalised plans yet, but we're looking to put, as I say, something very similar to what's already on there, nothing more than that. As soon as we have the finalised, we're sorting out the financial
And that's
side of
really,
it. Yeah.
as explained, we have to change the zoning to be able to do that.
To go in
because otherwise,
further.
because of the light
Light industrial,
right
yes.
now, the country
It's
prevents us
yeah.
from rebuilding otherwise.
I mean, we've cleared the site up quite a bit in the time that we've had it, and very shortly actually, and we're hoping I'm going to say this site, this side of 2017, with the little house.
Demolish that as well.
That will be gone, and the land will be, sort of prepped hopefully for, something new and, affordable that we can offer.
Right, and we can
Some
do
more,
that,
Noah tenants. That's, I guess, basically what we would like to do. If anyone's got any
Any questions?
questions for us?
I remember your presentation.
Oh, thank you.
So, good explanation. And what's your timelines? What's your personal timelines with this project?
To
Okay.
achieve this? Well, we'd like to do it as soon as we can.
Mhm.
We're finding, we've been trying to explore avenues for builders, and apparently there's none around at the moment.
They're busy.
So it's probably going to drag into next year
Yeah.
before we can, if everything goes according to plan, to actually try and just begin some kind of building. We're having meetings with our bank to talk about finances and things like that. But
So
we would like to do
we're
something
hoping
by
to
the
have
summer.
the site, prepped
this year.
in 2017, and then hopefully if we, everything goes according to plan, in the spring of 18, get something put on there as soon as if we can.
That would be the goal if we can,
Mhm.
if we can find a contractor.
And the
Yeah.
other thing, that the land division as well.
Oh, that's
There's the
true,
land
yeah.
division
Yeah,
aspect.
that's right. I forgot.
Yes,
Yeah,
something
but
else.
also,
That's why I was gonna say, there's definitely another duplex on there too, with
Yeah.
if we give them the other chunk, there's a lot of property there, isn't there, Jacob?
Yeah,
I mean, there's definitely, how many acres was it?
Oh, it's about half an acre.
0.4,
Point
four, yeah.
yeah.
That should hold 3, right? Is that correct with the, did we approve that, the vacated street? Vacate street? No.
No, not at this location. The way the rules work, so, I mean.
What's the little sliver of land you were talking about then?
Oh,
Talking about the road.
Oh,
yeah, there's,
With that, wouldn't that be, I mean.
That's not included in their property.
Oh,
It's
no.
still in
Yeah,
their
so the
property,
city's
just
separate,
needs
yeah.
some- That's what I understand.
this is the city's here, which is part of this property. Now, if you wanted to play with this line, you could potentially do that. I wouldn't support that if this was still industrial, but if this was apartment residential, you might be able to do a lot line adjustment. But as far as density potential,
Yeah,
it depends on which route they want to go. You could get apartments on there, you could get another single family dwelling on there, you could get a duplex. The reason though they have to do a land partition is our code is specific about having one principal use per lot or parcel. So there's two non-conforming aspects of this property. One is zoning, the other one is that you have two principal uses on one parcel, a duplex and a home. And so to get a new something, they have to cut it in two at least.
All we're talking about tonight is the zoning, correct?
That's correct, yeah.
Just the zoning. Everything else will be a separate process.
That's correct, yeah.
yeah.
It's just information on their roadmap to success, and this is stop number one.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
maybe I should ask you, what kind of time zone period would it take to hopefully go through that process of of rezoning if we were successful in what we're trying to do tonight?
The
The
partition,
petition,
Yeah.
yeah. It's
that's gonna add a few months.
months,
Yeah.
okay, so that may delay
So
what
that's
we were
probably
saying
why we
about
were,
building.
yeah, we
you
were
know,
thinking it's
if-
gonna be early
Yeah.
2018
Could be
before
later
we
in
get
the year,
something
then
put on.
so it
Mhm.
would depend on that,
Yeah.
obviously.
Jacob, would there be any restrictions with access and driveway road kinds of situations coming on to Deer Island Road at that point?
Absolutely. Yeah, access is one of the big things in my mind. We, as part of whatever they want to do, we're going to want to consolidate access as much as possible. Given the street classification and the spacing required. And so that's going to be one of the things that we try to achieve as part of the project is probably having a shared access between properties.
Moving that away from that intersection of where the railroad tracks cross the, and what is that, Oregon Street, I believe, and moving it away from there as far as possible, because I can see that, especially as a rail train goes through there, that I'm sure that that's going to add to congestion and add to access problems to that property, I would imagine. But I'm not, it's just conjecture. So not that that would stop anything, but it needs to be thought about.
Sure.
I would say that it has had 2 dwellings on that property for many,
Yeah.
many years.
And they both have
we're
their
not-
own separate, they pull off of the, they
There's
don't
2
park on
separate
Deer Island
drives.
Road, they have their own separate
Yeah.
driveways.
And that's what will
Yeah.
likely change.
Yeah,
Yeah, we
So
have-
what he's saying is basically the driveway to the duplex, the way it sits, because I live right around the corner.
Sure.
I'm familiar with the property.
Mhm.
I know the duplex sits back there a ways. That's
Yeah.
why I was asking about the property itself. I'm just
Yeah.
curious, there's a lot of room there.
yeah.
It would add 1 more family, but it wouldn't
Yeah.
add a huge amount. We're not planning to put up an apartment building or
No.
anything like that, you know, so.
No.
He's just saying basically you'd share the same driveway, a wider driveway coming in to access both
That would
places.
be a
Yeah.
thought,
Yes.
Yeah, that's what he's
Yeah.
saying.
Yeah.
Which is not what we're here about.
Okay.
And Jenny is right.
I
Counselor
just
Carlson.
just wanna make sure
Yep.
that, just for the process
On track.
tonight,
Yeah.
forecast or predict or whatever they're gonna do with their property, cause lots of things can change. That all we're deciding is
Yeah.
the zone tonight.
Mhm.
Anybody else have any other questions for him? We're done here, Jacob.
Okay, well, there's nobody else in the audience, so we don't have to do all that other stuff. Unless you have any more questions, we can close the hearing.
Okay. We're closed.
So what's deliberations happen a little later?
Okay.
Okay, sure.
We can stay for that.
Yeah, sure.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm guessing if we don't have a bunch of visitors, which you never know. Oh, I see LaSole's ahead of you. Uh-oh. Uh-oh. Could be a while.
We got 10 minutes before our next.
Yeah, I'm gonna pause this if we're all okay with that, because we have 10 minutes in between.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, okay. As long as we take a break and don't deliberate or anything. Yes, ma'am.
How did you guys feel? Did you guys feel that was too
Great
close? We're just trying to
yeah.
table out. This is
Should we
actually our
get-
first couple people.
okay.
Did you feel it was too close? Or
Tell them how to do it.
Yeah.
No,
This is
no,
wonderful.
it's
I
fine.
just put extra in.
Remember that
like
podium
someone
was there
teacher kept
before?
in, they said
Yeah, the
front row.
podium, right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that way
I
we
just
sort
always
of-
put a little
yeah.
more in.
So you're literally the first
What?
people.
Rich.
Yes.
The cable on the podium.
You're lucky we don't have the trapdoor in yet.
All right.
Are you going to school tonight?
Where's your seat?
What's that
Well,
school?
we give it, you know, it's about the children in high school, they don't
Yeah.
really have it.
Yeah.
Tomorrow night's gonna be
Yeah, yeah.
How's your daughter doing?
Good.
What grade she in?
Freshman,
Or there's that table.
Early yet.
yeah,
Rolled up.
volleyball.
Oh, Kaylee's at cross country meet.
Huh?
Kaylee's at cross country.
Yeah.
Trying to find the right home, she's not waiting.
So the next thing is you're going to stay upstairs.
Reminds me of my college days.
Yeah.
See, that is thinking outside the box.